Well, honestly, it was the fact that I failed at that
Mm,
for the first 10 years of my career working for another CPA firm.
mm,
I missed my children growing up for a decade, literally, because all I did was work. And I had great remorse. I could see the pain in their eyes. It affected my wife. It affected all of our relationships. Even to this day,
mm.
I have not been able to make up for a decade of just really not being there.
This podcast is sponsored by Engineered Tax Services, a subsidiary of Engineered Advisory, whose goal is to support CPAs and their clients to achieve the highest and best use of time and resources. ETS offers specialty tax services and incentives, which help expand your capabilities and ensure that your clients are paying only what is required in taxes and nothing more. To learn more about Engineered Tax Services, go to engineeredtaxservices.com and mention the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise podcast to receive project discounts and a free CPA partnership ebook. Hi, everyone. This is Heidi Henderson, and you are listening to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise podcast for accountants. I am really passionate about people and the industry. And I truly believe that the accounting industry can do better for both our clients and its professionals. So I'm going to share insights from people who have found professional success and who have managed to balance that with their physical, mental, and personal health. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope you get inspired. Accountants can earn free CPE from listening to this episode. Just visit earmarkcpe.com, download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. And now, on to the episode. Hi, everyone. Heidi Henderson here. And our guest today is Steve Adams. And I am real excited to talk with Steve today because, as some interesting background, Steve coincidentally has been my personal CPA for many years. I think over 15 years, I think, Steve, maybe longer. And there's a reason for that. Being in the space that I personally am in, we're always looking at people who or our consultants who have sort of that out of the box thought process and really looking to solve problems, to consult, and to look for opportunities. And Steve always had that mindset in my conversations with him from early on meeting him. And the other side of it, on a personal note, is Steve just has the biggest heart. He always has this attitude of, I just want to help. How can I help you? But I think that mentality is what, Steve, made you an amazing CPA and has made you a CPA because people care that you care. And I think because you do have that empathy with your clients, it gave you that mindset to always be looking at how you could truly help them, not just in preparing their tax returns, but in strategy. And so with that said, as background, Steve had started his own firm, Adams and Peterson, and has run a very successful firm here in Utah for a number of years. I'm going to let him kind of fill you in on the details so he can share his story about how he got there. He is recently retired, which is interesting, but shifting gears a little bit more into a consulting space. But I'm thrilled to work with Steve. I'm thrilled to have the relationship and to be able to interview him because I think here at Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise for accountants, he brings that full spectrum of the expertise as a CPA, as well as being able to balance his life, his family, his faith, his health, and all of those things. And that's really what I'm hoping to kind of drill into. How did you do that? How'd you manage it, Steve? So that's where we're going today. So with that, Steve, how about you give us a brief introduction about where you started? I love your story of how you became a CPA and started your firm. So tell us that story first.
Well, thank you, Heidi. And just glad to be here. And thank you for this invitation. I appreciate your kind words. So yeah, my career, if you will, in public accounting began right as I kind of graduated from college. I went to Weber State College in Ogden, Utah. And back in the day, job ads were placed in newspapers. and I saw this job ad for a 2 to 3 year CPA, experienced CPA, for a firm in Salt Lake City. I did not have any experience. I was just right out of college and thought, well, I'm just going to go down there and try to land a job. And I went in there and found the building and walked upstairs and opened the door. And right as I opened the door, I noticed there were about 10 people just standing there all talking together. They opened I popped my head in and they all stopped and just stared at me. And I had this kind of awkward moment. And I just looked down at my watch and I said, am I late to the meeting? And they thought that was, pretty funny, and they laughed, and anyway, the managing partner actually stopped the meeting and sat down with me in a conference room, talked with me and said, "Hey, you're not what we're looking for as far as experience goes, but you should be in marketing. Why are you going into accounting?" And I said, "Well, accounting is
Mm,
challenging, but it's about helping people, and it's about selling, if you will, services and help, relationships and strategies to people, isn't it? And I said, so almost every day, you are some type of a salesperson or a people person in accounting, if you want to think of it that way. And so I walked out of there with a job and had no experience and, spent 10 years working with them and had a great time, learned a lot of good and learned a lot of things that I would do differently. And that kind of motivated me. And there's a story along kind of the timeline there that we can talk a little bit more about the healthy side of things. But, I finally got myself to a point where I needed to break off and do my own thing. And so after 10 years, I started my own little firm, ran it for 5 years, and then joined up with a business partner and became Adams and Peterson and went from there. And so I spent 35 years in public accounting, which I often tell people felt like 95 years because we just worked a lot. It
yeah.
was just fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've always had this, desire to help people because regardless of what you're doing, with money, finances, tax returns. It's always tied into people. There's people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a quick rundown. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect introduction, and to your point, that's exactly right. I mean, I think sometimes we lose sight of the people behind the numbers, especially in the accounting
We
industry.
do.
And I think again, that's why I was excited to interview you because I know you have that perspective. But back to spending 10 years with this firm and then you sort of spun off and started your own firm. What that is a huge leap of faith. I
It is.
mean, a huge leap of faith. And tell us a little bit of what went through your mind and what possessed you, I guess, to take that step and want to branch out on your own.
Great question. Yeah, like I said, I really loved the people I worked with. I loved the clients there. There wasn't any sort of job dissatisfaction, but it came clear to me that I had a different direction and I wanted to help people in maybe a little different way than how they were structured. And so the opportunity came and I took it, but yeah, it was just, it was definitely a leap of faith. The first year I was in business on my own, when I had formed Steve Adams CPA PC, I ended the year with $400 in my bank account, and
Oh,
I
wow.
had I really had not paid myself that whole year, and I had left a career, or, with a job that had great benefits. I was paid really well. Everything was comfortable. There was no
Mhm.
logical reason, if you will, for me to make a move like that. I was a manager in tax and auditing. I had both skill sets. Back in the day, we didn't have the division of two separate, operations, tax versus audit. So I could run the gamut and everything was great. I really enjoyed it, but I had this opportunity to kind of do my own thing. And I just felt like I should take that and run and have, I just had this itch. And so that's what kind of got me going. Plus I knew I could help people the way I wanted to. Again, the firm I left was great, but had a little different mentality. It was kind of each of the partners operated kind of as a silo. So even though they were a firm, they really kind of ate what they killed, for lack of better
Mm,
words. And it became sometimes a power struggle between, well, the main managing founding partner. If one of his clients needed something, then everybody else just took a back seat. And it didn't
mhm,
matter if somebody else was in line beforehand to get taken care of. All of a sudden, it became, the kind of the internal joke was kind of like a what we call WIFO, which was the main manager's last name W. WIFO, his stuff in first, his stuff out last. It didn't matter. It was always his stuff. He became kind of the benevolent dictator, and everybody else took a back seat. But I realized that everybody needs to be served and serviced, not just the managing partner and their
mhm.
clients. Everybody needed that, and so I took that and
Yeah.
changed it, and I actually formed a firm where we meet, every week with the list of clients, and we take care of those that need to be taken care of. It doesn't matter if they're a huge client or a smaller client, we get them taken care
Mhm.
of because of the people factor.
Okay, nice. Well, tell me a little bit, if you don't mind sharing, and you may not want to share revenue numbers or whatnot, which is okay, but tell me a little bit, as your firm matured.
Yeah,
I know that you were in one of the top rankings of firms in Utah.
yeah.
I watched you grow from a small firm to building your beautiful building and being a larger firm right off the freeway, really nice exposure. So tell me a little bit about how that firm grew and before you retired, what you had achieved.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we were ranked by Utah Business Magazine in the top 20 firms in Utah. We were competing against multi regional firms and national firms, and so we had a great for little Davis County, Utah. We were and still are, in my opinion, the premier smaller firm. We 25 employees. I started out with just me, a part-time accountant, and a part-time admin person, and
Mhm.
ran it and grew it and brought in a good business partner, brought in good staff, looking for the right people. We learned really quickly that hiring the right person to fit in with the firm culture often would be more important than somebody with a specific skill set that seemed
Yeah,
great. And so
yeah.
we wanted people
Well,
working for
and
us like that.
a
Yeah.
and not to interrupt, but on that point, how did you do that? What would you say was your means for identifying people that you felt like would fit in with your culture?
Great question. So one of the things, obviously, we wanted to find out how well they knew their accounting. So we gave them actually a really simple little test that they had to
Mhm.
fill out without looking online or anything. We would kind of just watch and see how they kind of handled that stress in filling out this little 10 question, some yes, no, true, false, debit, credit, that could tell us really quickly if somebody was just talking the talk or if they knew their stuff. So that helped us to kind
Mhm.
of get through that. But we would notice their demeanor. We would ask a lot of questions. We call them kind of the stay questions. What does it get you? What motivates you? What Tell us where you see yourself in 5 or 10 years. So we would really ask a lot of questions that helped us to identify somebody who was going to be a team player with the firm versus somebody who just had their self-interest at heart, and they really didn't want to be part of a team. We took a team approach. We weren't hiring individuals to do their own thing. We wanted people who could work within the team. And if you analyze it to a basketball team, sometimes the point guards bring in the ball down the court, sometimes not, and it just depends
Yeah.
on, be where you need to be in position and play what you need to play. Come in when we need you to come in, and be part of a team. And so, yeah, we learned really quickly. We actually hired a lot of people from a CPA firm that we bought and merged their
Mm.
practice in with ours. The culture, it was a shock to them, and
Yeah, that can be hard
yeah, it
transition.
was a very hard transition, and so most of those people did not last,
Mm,
in our firm because we have a lot of systems. We want people that think outside of the box and don't want to take work as just a country club thing where you show up at 11 o'clock and go home at 2, and yeah, we had to work, and so yeah, we definitely
yeah.
put a lot of time into talking with people before we hired them and then trying to mentor them as we hired them and work with them, tell them to be patient, give themselves some time to learn how we operate and, just be a team
Mhm.
player.
Yeah, I mean, culture is so important because you can have someone with the wrong attitude, and it's incredible how they can damage the whole firm
Correct.
and the staff with conversations and with attitudes and personality traits and things like that. So yeah, I have found that I agree that in hiring, it seems that personality and culture fit are as important as the technical skills in many cases
For sure.
for building that culture. So, the accounting space is it's competitive. I mean, you're out there and when we look at just simply tax preparation, that can be a commodity and it's what's the lowest bidder in terms of the price that you're going to charge for a tax return or tax prep. And I think I know the answer to this question because I worked with you and it's why I worked with you. But I want you to answer the question about what was the biggest differentiator? How did you differentiate yourself in the market to your prospects or clients? And how did you grow the firm and really continue to carry that, um, I guess, that persona of what your firm represented?
Yeah, great question. So several arms, if you will, to that octopus, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah.
We one of the things that we really wanted our clients to understand up front is we were here to advise and have relationships and help give best business practices. We want to be there. We don't want to just do transactions. If you want somebody that is just going to kick out a 1040 tax return and that's all you want, then go to TurboTax, go to H&R Block, go to your cousin down the street that works in their basement. That's great. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's plenty of
Yep.
room. But I found out that if we didn't have expectations for what our clients were expected to do and what we promised to do for our clients, if we didn't have that set up front, there was oftentimes a misalignment and they weren't
Yeah.
happy and we weren't happy. And so we really fine tuned a lot of processes and procedures for onboarding clients
Mm,
and making sure there was a good fit. And sometimes we would have to say to somebody, we're probably not a good fit. And I think a lot of times CPA firms are so afraid to turn away business. They just are grasping for anything that they can get, that they're
yeah.
oftentimes taking on difficult clients, that it's not a healthy, working relationship. Plus, our clients knew up front that our staff is our number one asset. We love our clients, but if you belittle our staff, if you're rude, angry, causing problems for our staff, we will fire you as a client because our employees, our staff, our people are number one to us, and we want to
Yeah.
protect them. So, yeah,
Well, it's so interesting you say that because I think that actually leads into kind of this segue I want to go into until kind of current market conditions and going through COVID and now looking at, being understaffed in almost every industry, including the CPA industry, finding that we're understaffed and not having the people to do the work. But then, secondhand, I think that the staff and the generation that's upcoming has a much different perspective on work and work life balance and the time that they're willing to put in and needing to have time to live their lives and not having their work dictate everything. So it ties to client retention. So I mean, in many firms right now, we have firms that are firing their C and D level sort of clients, the ones that are difficult or the ones that have certain issues because they don't have capacity. I think it's fascinating because of your personality of wanting to help people. That probably was not an easy thing to say no or to walk away from a client or potential client. But I really appreciate and respect your perspective on the value of your employees and being willing to do that, even if it's not just for you or lining your pockets, but for how your clients are treating those employees. So that's one question I have for you. This segue is really about then how do you handle with your staff keeping them happy? But I'll sort of secondarily add to that question that has to do with having a heavy workload. We know that in the accounting space, we have tax season where sometimes it requires major hours, long days, long weeks. How do you handle that and balance that with staff and keeping up with workloads when maybe you're understaffed and undermanned and hours are difficult? So, and maintaining that culture. I know that's loaded. And again, to your point, an octopus with lots of legs, but I think you kind of get the concept of what I'm asking.
Yes, no, great question. So when I began in public accounting, it was like the first year that we were dealing with the 1986 Tax Reform Act, and we were doing everything by hand. And it
Mm,
required these big horse blanket spreadsheets, the 13 column, by pen, pencil, 10 key, no computer, doing the accounting by hand, doing the tax return by hand. And it required us to physically be at the office. And I would work countless days around the clock, 24-hour, get in early, stay late, not go home, because it just, that's what the work, required during a certain period of time. And then I would make up for that in the summers by, I worked hard in the winter and played hard in the summer. And
mhm,
so as technology began to change, we realized that we have to keep on top of that and utilize that in ways to help our staff feel more job satisfaction and be able to balance their work life. And so you mentioned COVID. When COVID hit, we were still the typical CPA firm of having everybody in the office working. We would bring
mm,
in dinner every night. It was right in the middle of tax season when, about March 20, I can't remember, it was in the middle of March
yep,
sometime when all of a
yep,
sudden we got word we're shutting everything down. Well, we had also I had a vision. I knew that we needed to get rid of all this paper. We needed to be electronic, and we had constant problems with an on-site server. So for years
mm,
before COVID hit, we moved to cloud-based everything. So, and electronics, so that I could literally be sitting on a beach in Maui, and as long as I had a browser connection, I could connect and do whatever I needed to do, even as though I were sitting at the office. Well, when COVID hit, we looked at each other and we said, okay, unplug your computers, take them home. They basically were just browser computers, kind of a dummy, if you will,
mhm.
computer, because they just needed to have access and monitors. Basically, we've spent more on monitors. Most of our staff had like 4 monitors. We said, just take that stuff home.
Yeah,
You can't be
yep,
here.
mhm,
And so we transitioned without a hiccup. It was, we were very fortunate to have prepared ourselves for that. And then as things started going, and I realized that the staff they were thriving being at home because they didn't have commute time. They could disconnect and be with their families for dinner, where before it became very difficult because we were bringing dinners in. And as this
mhm,
evolved, I kept saying to myself, I'm not sure that I want them back in the office. I don't know that it's in their best interest. And so we would encourage them to come to the office if they wanted to, if they needed a break, if they were feeling too disconnected, they would have a space, but otherwise they could stay and work from home. And we would, a lot of times before we got to that point, our staff didn't believe us when we would say, hey, if you have a family event, your child has a 5th birthday, I don't want to see you here. Go home. And I would actually have to say that to
mhm.
the spouse, whether it was a husband of a female employee or the wife of a male employee. I would say to the spouse, if you're husband or wife is not home with you and your family, you cannot look at me because I will have already given the okay for them to go. You need to get after them and drag them. I actually kicked a few of our employees out to go home when I found out they weren't home. And I realized that small break of gave them wind in their sails. And I was
Yeah.
always fearful to do that in my old firm. It was like if I wasn't there, I was in trouble. And I just didn't want that. And also, for anybody out here who's listening, we spent a lot of time sending little gifts and things to the spouse of
Oh, wow.
our employees. So, like a gift card or Miki Couture blankets or dinner night, date, movie
Best
night
blanket ever.
things. Yeah, we would send that. We tell them thank you because you are just as important to our firm as the employee is.
Mm.
Because we need
Wow.
you guys to be bought into this, both of you, your family. And if we're out of alignment, let's figure it out. And we also gave employees opportunities to go from full-time to part-time when we wanted them to stay with us forever. And when their career needed to change because of a birth, a death, a marriage, a divorce, whatever it was, if they needed to switch, we would say, look, rather than quitting, let's figure out some way to work with you and keep you employed. And so we
Wow.
definitely did a lot of thinking outside of the box from the traditional mindset.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how did that translate into retention with those employees?
Very little turnover. To be
Yeah.
honest with you, yeah, we felt very fortunate. I mean, in fact, we even we had times when people were like, "Well, I got to quit. I'm moving down to Price, Utah." Actually, you don't need to quit. Just take your computer with you and keep working. And it's like,
Wow.
I can do that. Yeah. And so now all of a sudden, instead of having one office in Clearfield, Utah, we had 25 or so because we had 25 people working sometimes remote, some in St. George. I hired people that had never stepped foot in our office. And so the
Wow.
technology is great, in that regard.
Yeah, that's amazing because one of the things that I'm hoping to just discuss with some of our firms is the change in the industry as a whole, that there are fewer people graduating with degrees in accounting. There are fewer people willing to go into the profession because of tax season and the heavy workloads that are associated with tax season. I was meeting with a firm out of New York and a gentleman who's been a managing partner for many years who was really struggling with the mentality that some of his staff were not willing to work some of those long hours and that they wanted to work from home because he had come up, just like you were explaining, in an industry where for him to make it pave the way for his career, he had to work around the clock 24 hours a day for weeks on end during tax season. And he felt like that was some type of initiation. And, not saying that that's right, wrong, or indifferent. I think that the change or the sort of where we're going in the industry now is that the younger generations and younger people that are coming up in the industry are just not willing to do that. And they typically will not stay. You don't have that retention that you discussed. And so I think that you having that flexibility has probably really been huge for your firm and for your growth because of that. And I think too, kudos to you for being open to that because, as I said, I've had many conversations with people who have really struggled with people not willing to work around the clock. Do you still see some of that with your staff? Are they still putting in some of those long hours? And maybe is your flexibility and care of them and their families converting into more willingness for them to work those long hours when needed?
Great question. And yes, we've instituted several policies and I would say systems that evolve into goals where I realized after busy season, why not from the first part of May all through the summer until the September 15th deadline, why not just shut the office down on Friday
Mm,
and not have a requirement for people to work? If you want to work on Friday, that's your choice. But we would prefer that you take Friday off, be with your family, have a long weekend, come back with wind in your sails on Monday. So several years ago, that became one of our things was, okay, I remember, your friend in New York, I feel his pain. I feel the pain of those who worked really hard
Yeah.
and feel like there is this initiation. But I also realized times and things have changed. It's not the same. We don't typically go across the country riding a train or in a horse and buggy. We're pretty much now using airplanes, right? Or Zoom
Yeah.
for that matter. We're physically here, but we can
Yeah.
connect with somebody in New York via Zoom. And so it was hard as a managing partner to get rid of that old school mentality and try to put myself in the place of these 20 some odd year olds that are coming out of college and 30-year-olds that have been around for a little bit. I would try so hard to understand what made each of them tick. If the thing that made them tick was working their tails off, we gave them a green light, go ahead. If the thing that made them tick was, I'm going to do good work, but I need time to be with my family, then we made sure we did that within some, understanding and parameters so that there wasn't,
Mhm.
we can't just have people just not working, but we can be flexible in that. And this is why we
Yeah.
loved the chance of people going home during busy seasons, because they
Mm.
could then spend time from maybe 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 o'clock at night with their family, get kids tucked in bed, or go review homework if that was their thing, or if they don't have kids, they
Yeah.
go out and be with their spouse or significant other or whatever, and then they can log back in, later on at night. They don't have to come back to the office. And so we tried really hard to find out. Every year we would do a performance review and ask them, how do you feel? What is going on? What has changed? How can we help you meet your goals? We want to know what you're concerned about, what makes you tick, and has it changed from last year? And we would also have, staff meetings where we would try to drill down. And so, yeah, there is this mentality of the industry requires these deadlines. There's not much we can do about it. But also for anybody out there listening, if you recall, COVID extended the deadline and made
Yep.
2 very long, busy seasons. Well, we handled that,
It just made one
yeah, it
one
never
long,
stopped. Yeah,
consistent
yeah.
tax season. It never ended.
Exactly. Yeah, it was crazy. But we realized sometimes we push so hard. We had this goal at one time to not extend any April 15th tax returns. If you got us your stuff, we were going to get it in.
Mm.
Found out really quickly that was killing us. It was killing our staff, and clients would wait until, the 14th to send something and think we're going to get it done by the 15th. So we put an
Yep.
end to that. We said, look, we started having very proactive, that we set a system in place where if you did not have your April 15th information to us prior to the end of March, our clients knew they were automatically going to get extended. We would work through an extension calculation to try to reduce any penalties or interest,
Mhm.
but the extension is just fine for you to file the paperwork. And we had to do a lot of training of those clients to understand that. And that
Yeah.
really helped. But COVID also helped us to show them, see, there's ways to deal with this where you do not have to have this management by crisis. The sky does not fall and end on April 15th. We've got some time.
Yeah.
Let's take advantage.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge perspective. And I really appreciate what you're saying is the importance of essentially training your clients, setting the expectation up front and communicating with them to understand what is required of them in order for you to be able to perform. And I think, there's a lot of firms that probably can learn from that in really focusing on being proactive. And of course, back to being overloaded and understaffed, proactivity can be a struggle sometimes as well. But I think you hit the nail on the head with clearly setting those expectations. Back to a comment that you were making with your staff and having that empathy that you carry for understanding their families and their kids and those important moments in their lives. I think also understanding how much impact that has on their mental well-being and their happiness, which essentially translates oftentimes to longevity with your firm. Let's now switch this back to you, Steve. I want to put a little pressure on you personally. What caused Steve to have this empathy, and to be able to kind of put yourself in their shoes and look at it from that perspective, thinking about their families, their spouses, their kids, and those things. What is it about Steve that drove that?
Yeah. Well, honestly, it was the fact that I failed at that
Mm,
for the first 10 years of my career working for another CPA firm.
mm,
I missed my children growing up for a decade, literally, because all I did was work. And I had great remorse. I could see the pain in their eyes. It affected my wife. It affected all of our relationships. Even to this day,
mm.
I have not been able to make up for, um, a decade of just really not being there, and when
Wow.
our children, were young. And so when I see these young kids who are getting married, or whatever their situation is, maybe they aren't married, but they have, a dog, or they have pets, or, we want to be aware of what is important in your life. And I just realized that the money will come eventually, but the people will stay if you treat them like people, and not as a property or as just a project. If you're really concerned with them and the people in their world, looking for ways to make their lives easier again.
Yeah.
I highly recommend recognizing spouses,
Mm.
sending something home. We would have things delivered to their houses. If we knew a spouse during COVID, I don't know how many DoorDash dinners I sent to staff,
That's
because
amazing.
yeah, it just cost it, and then they loved it, because we knew that husband and wife and their two kids were home,
Mhm.
all with COVID, and they
Yeah.
were
Oh,
struggling,
shoot.
and so we would find out, okay, let's DoorDash some meals. Let's get
Wow.
them, some stuff. Tell them to take the time that they need. I was obnoxious. Here in Utah, we get big snowstorms, and I would send texts early in the morning because I'm up. Look, if it's treacherous, safety first. Don't think you got to be to the office by 8 a.m.
Mm,
Get here when you can. Your safety's more important. If you can't get here, that's fine. If we just shut
yeah.
the doors down because
Mhm.
it's bad, that's fine. So we have to roll with the punches, a little bit, and realize, the old, "Who moved my cheese" book kind of
Yeah.
concept. Things change, and you
Yeah.
gotta be willing to change with it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and your first response there, just about realizing that you missed time with your kids, I mean, that's poignant. I mean, I feel that when you say those words and realize and I think my kids being in their 20s seem to have such a huge importance placed on memories and moments and experiences, more so than committing, a massive part of their careers to their jobs and their work lives. And at first I really struggled with that because, I have a little bit of an old school mentality. But the longer this continues, the more I see the light in that, and the benefit to people and families, relationships to children. And I so appreciate and respect that perspective. Talking back, back about you as well, there's another thing that's always been really interesting about you that I've respected, and that is that you have always clearly taken the time, or, what seems like a priority, to take care of yourself physically. You're a strong, healthy guy. We're friends on social media, so he's got his passion. Steve is a Harley guy, and he likes to get on his Harley and get outdoors. And seems that exercise and fitness has been something really important. How have you managed to incorporate that in your life? Not only being a CPA, working through tax season, managing a firm, managing employees, and still doing that.
That is a great question. In fact, I'm glad you didn't know me during the first, like, about 7 years when I worked in Salt Lake City.
Mm,
As you can imagine, I got into a routine where we ate lunch every day at what was then the Crossroads Mall in downtown Salt Lake City.
Hmm.
And it was fast food, Wendy's, French fries, full sugared Coke, shake, the afternoon, Dr. Pepper, Snickers bar. I went to it, I slowly started putting on this weight and I didn't realize it until I went to Las Vegas with my family. My kids were young and we got to this place. I think was there a circus
Yeah,
or I
yeah,
don't know, there was some
probably.
place.
Good place to take the
And
kids.
so they had this thing where they would either guess your age or guess your weight.
Oh,
And so I told the lady, I said, guess my weight. And she kind of wrote down the number that she thought I weighed. And I had this really big sweatshirt on. I stepped on the scale and it was 200 pounds.
mm.
Now, my frame I'm not a 200-pound, this was not good 200 pounds. This was just overweight.
Oh, wow.
And she looked at me and she goes, where are you hiding that? I mean,
Wow.
she literally woke me up right then. And I looked at myself and I said, I should literally, for my frame, I should be about 165, 160. I'm 40 pounds overweight.
Wow.
I went home from that and it affected me so much that what I did was I just set this system in place where it didn't matter what time I got home at night. It didn't matter what the weather was. I was going to walk around the block. So for the next literally, and I think this happened like in October,
Right before winter.
all through right for winter, all during busy season, I would get home literally, and this is not a joke, sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning, and I would go on a walk. I would walk. I promised myself that I would not miss a day.
Wow.
Well, it began with just being able to walk around the block. Then it was walk around 2 blocks. Then I thought, well, I can run this. Eventually, I worked at this every day till every day when I came home, didn't matter what time, I ran 3 miles. And
Wow.
I all of a sudden, one of my neighbors one day in the summer, so this had gone on for 7, 8 months in the summer, he saw me out running and he said, Steve, tell me about and I told him all this running I'd been doing and stuff. He goes, you have a huge base of miles. Let's go on a 10-mile run. And I looked at Jeff and I said, no way. I went on a 10-mile run with this dude and I ran better than he did. And and
Wow.
anyway, bottom line is it opened my eyes. And so from that point on, I decided I had to have these systems in place.
Mm.
If I had a goal to lose 40 pounds or 50 pounds or 60 pounds, whatever, I would never have accomplished it if I didn't have a system of, all right, every day, just do some sort of exercise, no matter what time you got home, just
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And so that, I just realized that there's time to keep yourself healthy and all of a sudden I had more mental clarity. I had more confidence. That's what also gave me the confidence to start my own firm, because before then I really didn't have the confidence to kind of go out and do that. I thought I was just this puppet and
Mhm.
I kind of got sucked into a routine of working for somebody else and I lost myself in that process.
Wow.
And so I had to get back. And anyway, so bottom line is, yeah, I now love to keep active. I have systems in place every day to keep me going and just try to enjoy life. And you can do it, but there's got to be that work-life balance.
Yeah. And is that something that you literally just set down a commitment that you were doing that every day, no matter what, and that
Yep,
no excuse, no
exactly.
catastrophic snowstorm or anything else was going to
Did
get in the way?
did not matter. I was committed because I saw myself on a trajectory that was not good, for health. And I knew I needed to take control of it. I didn't exactly know how. I didn't know at the beginning that walking around the block would eventually lead into me being able to run 10 miles, which eventually led me into running several St. George marathons and what we call Crazy Bob's mountain run. This is a 12-mile up a mountain and down a mountain and all, so I loved it. It opened up a whole new world.
Well,
And I just realized I don't want to ever lose that. So I just got to keep at it. And
well,
it just happened. Yeah.
well, that's so interesting because, to your point, There are so many people who say, "Well, I hate to exercise. It's horrible. I can't stand it," or "I can't run. I just don't have the ability to run." And it's so fascinating to hear your story that you just started by walking around the block, and it was never even a goal to do anything else. It wasn't a goal that I'm gonna run a marathon at some point. It was that you committed to walking around the block every night. And then over a process of time, it evolved into, running a marathon or, a long distance run or something. I mean, that's fascinating to me because I think it absolutely highlights the value of habit. I think forming habits
Right.
and you just get in the process, but it is committing that no matter what, at a certain time, whether that's first thing in the morning, like for me, it's interesting. I have to get up and do it first thing in the morning before I do anything else. If I don't, I won't ever. I can push it off and say, I'm going to do it this evening or I'll do it later. And everything else takes precedence. For you, that was the evening. I don't think I would have the willpower to do it if I'd worked all day and it was 2 o'clock in the morning and convinced myself to go out for a walk. But I respect that and that how that worked for you. I think that's the key is that whatever it is that works for you, it's setting that commitment and creating those habits that just kind of evolve and grow from there. So it's really fascinating. I love hearing
It,
how you progress
yeah.
through that.
Exactly. If you set those systems in place to reach those habits and to reach those goals, and you just do it. In fact, this boss of mine, as he saw me losing weight, he thought I was sick. He said,
Oh,
"Did you catch some sort of disease or something?" And I said, "No, I'm losing weight." He wondered what was going on. I
wow.
In Utah, you have a place called Mr. Mac where you can buy these cheap suits. They have lifetime alterations. I went in to have these suits altered, and they argued with me that they weren't my suits. There's no
Wow.
way you bought these suits, and these are somebody else's. And I said, no, check your records. These are the suits I bought when I weighed 200 pounds.
Wow.
I need the free lifetime alterations because I'm down to 150. And and so it was very shocking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it was a healthy 150. It was
Yeah.
one of those things where it just needed to get there.
Yeah, amazing. And so how or what impact, if any, has that had on your colleagues, on your partners, on your staff? Maybe there's nothing, but I'm curious if that had an impact on the people around you that maybe inspired them.
I hope so. I carried this into the firm that I started, and I always told the staff before we even had the health insurance that would cover going to a gym. I said, I'll pay for you to go to a gym
Mm,
and for your membership. And I said, and then I would talk about these things that I would do, and I would see some of them and I would try to explain how to keep it going, and I'd see them struggle for a little while, then they would give up, and so, I don't know, it is hard. There were some that kept at it, but, all you can do is try to be an example and talk to people
yeah.
that wanna listen. I had several reach out to me and say, "How do I do this? How do I do that?" And I would I'm not an expert, but I would give them some good ideas, and then I'd say, "You know what? You ought to go to a gym and get with a trainer, get with a nutritionist,
Mhm.
talk to your doctor, get some ideas here going and do some things rather than just stay on this trajectory where if you keep going like this." And I even said to a few of them, I said, you want to be healthy for your grandchildren and even your kids.
Mhm.
um, what do you need to do here? How can I help, believe it or not, to help you make these goals? And so sometimes you lead a horse, if you will, to water and it won't drink. Well,
Yep.
that's all you can do, right?
Yeah,
As
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's so true. It is so true, and it's each of our individual journeys, but I was really curious as to the impact, and I would imagine that that there's been at least, one or a few people who have been inspired and impacted by your care and empathy towards their well-being as a whole person versus just as an employee, and, so that's
Yeah.
amazing, and, to kind of wrap up, this ultimately is again my goal with even doing this podcast is I love the information about firms and what has made them successful and why and what's the differentiator. but also how people have been able to blend that in with their overall balance of their life and their well-being, because we do see a large percentage of individuals in the industry who work extremely long hours and are not able to find that balance towards taking care of themselves physically and mentally, and finding that balance with their families. And I just love that, although you didn't at first, I love that you recognized the impact of not doing that and then changed your trajectory in your profession, but then with your career and your staff have encouraged them to not make the same mistakes. And that is just like, to me, I find that profound. And I'm so appreciative of you joining and sharing your story. I think it's amazing. Thrilled to be working with you and have you on the podcast. I think our listeners will enjoy this. But Steve, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for your story again. And we will talk to you
Heidi.
again
Appreciate
soon.
it. Great.
Okay, thank you.